Hello, welcome to the channel. Today's story is about redemption. OP's wife cheated on him with her boss, then left him years later. His wife is still suffering the consequences from her actions while OP is living his best life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the story. A story of redemption after a failed reconciliation. Hello everyone, I've been lurking around for a few weeks and have engaged with enough posts to feel that it is time for a formal introduction. My story happened close to 30 years ago. I'm currently 62. This happened in my late 20s, early 30s. Back then I married my college sweetheart. What always attracted me to her was how I perceived her as a strong and independent woman. The icing on the cake was that she also was what you could call a Caribbean beauty. We married, and 4 days later we relocated to the east coast of the USA to begin new jobs. Me as an engineer and she as a chemist. I would say that the first 4 years of our marriage were, if not idyllic, at least happier than the average marriage. Since we had no family and friends close, we spent a lot of time with each other, and we had some great times together. Our troubles started when we decided to purchase a townhouse, and I thought that the next logical step in our relationship was to start a family. To my surprise, when I proposed this idea, it threw a relationship into a deep downward spiral. After many arguments, my ex confessed that it was not that she did not want to have children, but that she did not want to have children with me. Ouch. She also said that having a child with me would mean tying herself completely to me, and she did not know if she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. After these conversations, things did not improve until one day she came and told me that she was not attracted to me anymore. I asked her if there was someone else she was attracted to, and she said yes, that she felt a great attraction for her boss. You see, unknown to me, she and her boss developed an infatuation with each other. In her job, she had to travel about 50 of the time, and he would accompany her on these trips. By the time she confessed her feelings for him, they had already developed a platonic relationship, which soon turned physical on one of these trips. When returning from this trip, I could see that something had changed. She was very contrite and began to talk about selling our home and moving to a smaller town in which we could just have a little house with a little garden, and we would begin new and more quiet lives. I must admit, I was like, what the F are you talking about? You have been talking about not loving me, not wanting to have children with me, and now wanting to relocate with me. She then began to tell me this long story about how her mom, who was divorced and remarried when she was having her own marriage problems with her first husband, had taken a vacation to Mexico and had a one-week tryst with a local man. This all should have raised all sorts of alarms in my mind, as it was an almost admission that she had cheated with her boss on this most recent trip. But I was a lot younger and a lot denser in the head, so I missed the obvious of the situation. After this revelation, things precipitated rapidly. She began working late, taking weekends by herself in the mountains, where later I learned her boss had a cabin, and even taking a one-week vacation by herself in order to clear her mind. Keep in mind, these were the times of no cellular phones, so there was no way I could have gotten a hold of her. I still remember how crazy I was going without any communication with my wife for a whole week, without knowing where she was. All sorts of scenarios were floating in my head, except the most obvious: she's with her lover on a one-week fun trip. Throughout all this time I continued to support her and paid for individual counseling, drove her to her appointments, and even waited for her in the car. I think the individual counseling convinced her that she was being very unfair to me because she intimated that the idea of divorce came from him and not her. I was still hanging to the hope that with the right amount of individual counseling I was going to be able to help her sort her mind and become the wife she had been right after our wedding. It was clear she was in deep turmoil, in which sometimes she would say she loved me and sometimes she could not stand to be in my presence. With time I started noticing that she would try to get into arguments with me by telling me different reasons why she was not happy. She would keep on fishing for a reason which would get me upset. Once she hit on one, she would escalate the attacks until I just would leave the house searching for peace, and she could get on the phone and call her lover based on phone records. The day she asked me for a divorce, my life crumbled. I knew we were having our troubles, but never my wildest dreams would I have thought of divorce. Here you must understand that I come from a very Catholic culture, Hispanic, and the idea of divorce was anathema to me. Around this time I had to take a trip to a different state for a 2-week training. When I came back, she was gone, along with one half of our furniture and one half of our savings. I had no idea where she had gone. Back then I had no one to lean on to. There was no interest, no Reddits, no online resources or communities. I felt alone, abandoned, and fell into a deep crevice of depression. I had basically let myself go for the previous 17 months while dealing with all the drama and stress. I had gained a lot of weight and really didn't care about my health or my appearance. I firmly believe that we look the way we feel, and back then I looked like crap. My ex had left me with no return address and no way to contact her. The original no contact, while making sure to tell all of our friends that this was all my fault, so I also lost the few close friends I had. I was completely alone. Luckily I was able to drag myself to work every day and made enough to keep the lenders away. After almost a year of feeling like crap, one morning I awoke and noticed how the shadows slowly moved on the empty walls of the empty rooms of my home, and it dawned on me, if I did not pull myself out of the hellhole of despair I was living in, soon I would become another shadow in the wall of an empty room. To give you an idea of how I felt back then, 5 years ago I had open heart surgery. They cut my chest open, split my sternum, and spread my ribs so that the surgeons could have access to my internal organs. After reconfiguring my organs, they wired my chest and sewed me up. I still have 12 titanium wires holding my chest. It took me 17 months to return to a semi-normal way of living, and you know something, I would gladly have another open heart surgery than reliving the experience of spousal betrayal and abandonment. It was brutal. It was by the grace of God that I pulled myself out of that well of despair and began to rebuild my life. I decided to completely remake myself. I had a good job and a roof over my head. I began to exercise and lost 50 pounds. Got a new wardrobe, got rid of my glasses, got eye contacts, began to run, and eventually trained for a marathon. I began to rock climb and play league volleyball. I began to live a life I could be proud of. I'm not the most good-looking guy, but I began to irradiate an aura of confidence that people noticed and women found attractive. Soon I began to date and realized that my wife's betrayal was the best thing that happened to me because it allowed me to discover the real me. After a couple of years of living this life, I began to look for another life companion, which I found in a friend from work. We had been co-workers before my troubles began, and she had witnessed my decline and how I had slowly remade myself. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life. The guards in my building, whom I was buddy with, could not believe it when I told them that I was dating what they knew as the babe of the building. Eventually, we fell in love and married. She quit her job and decided to stay at home to focus on raising our 4 kids. This meant being a one-income family on the very expensive east coast of the USA. It also meant that we could not live a life of luxury, but my wife turned out to be a great home manager and a better mom. This woman ran triathlons and learned great auto maintenance, woodworking, and general carpentry while managing a family of 6. There is no house project she is not willing to attack, and we are currently building a camper van so that we can drive across the USA when I retire this December. This winter we will be welcoming our first grandchild. I can honestly say my wife made me discover the true meaning of a strong and independent woman. My life has been so much enriched because of her. So you see, no one knows what the future would bring. All we have to do is get our act together and trust that there are good people also seeking and willing to share their lives with us. Betrayal should not define us, especially if no reconciliation is possible, and even if reconciliation doesn't work, this doesn't mean it is the end of our roads. You might be wondering what happened to the ex. Well, a few years after she left me, I heard that within months of her abandonment, her boss divorced his wife, and they moved together and eventually got married. About 15 years ago, she called me right out of the blue. I'm still wondering how she got my number to let me know a mutual friend had passed away. We had a short but cordial conversation. At one point I asked her how she was doing, and she said that she was living with the consequence of youthful mistakes. To which I answered, that's all in the past, I don't even think about it, and I hung up. I can honestly say that in my heart I have gratitude for her, because her decisions brought me and my wife together. One last thing, another consequence of my failed marriage and reconciliation. Deacon for the divorced and separated. I have worked with literally dozens of people that were struggling with their divorces to help them find some peace and look forward to their future with confidence. All thanks to my ex-wife's reluctance to reconcile with me. Edit. I have received a few questions which I will answer as an epilogue to my story. Did she ever apologize? She never even said goodbye. It was as if the years we spent together, we met in college and were best friends for a number of years before we started dating, meant nothing to her. Neither she apologized. Did you ever talk to her? We had bought a townhouse together, and she was paying part of the mortgage. In order to communicate, she developed this very bizarre process of phone calls between friends so that I could get a hold of her, and then she would call me if she thought communication was necessary. Since I did not change my number, she could call me at any time. We only talked a handful of times. Did you ever see her again? Between her abandonment and her final divorce, I saw her 3 times. The last one the day our divorce became final. This was a couple of years after she abandoned me. She looked like crap. No makeup, very hippy dippy clothes. I, on the other hand, had lost 50 pounds and was hitting the weights pretty hard back then. In addition, because of how much weight I had lost, all my clothes were tailored cheaper than buying new, so that day I looked sharp with the suit and tie I was wearing. The last look she gave me when the judge was asking me if I had any objections with the divorce agreement is forever burned in my mind. Pure hatred. I guess her narcissistic brain could not comprehend how much I had thrived without her negative influence in my life. Wow op. My reaction. I am absolutely amazed at the progress you've made. Sometimes in life it takes someone having to hit rock bottom to truly be able to take the steps to transform their life, and that is what has happened to you. The time period you went through was absolute hell, but by doing so you are able to reach the end of the tunnel. This story is an inspiration to many who are in or have been in a similar situation to Op. Remember that if you continue to persevere and work through what happened, you will ultimately find the light. Now you are living your best life while your wife's life is in shambles. What an inspiring story to read. So, what did you think of today's story? Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. See you next video.